And just as it says in Ephesians, that the enmity that was sown in our flesh, the enmity that natural man has against God's commandments. Remember, it is a natural man who doesn't subject himself to the commandments of God. He has enmity against God's commandments. He doesn't want to obey. He is at enmity with God's plan. It says that that enmity was nailed to the cross. That animosity against his law and commandments was nailed to the cross. That enmity was nailed. And unless men teach us to have enmity, after the Messiah has nailed that enmity to the cross, our natural response is, if you love me, keep my commandments. That's our natural response, unless we are poisoned by religion. Because why religion poisons us is because men make rules and regulations, doctrines and commandments, that they would rather have you incarcerated, controlled by their rules and regulations than be free in the Messiah to just love him and keep his commandments because you love. Not because it is in tables of stone, because it's been written on your heart. Just like Ruth. The Torah was written in her heart. She wanted to love. She wanted to obey. And because that was her heart, it was a condition of her heart that the kinsman redeemer took a bride of the Gentiles. She didn't want to argue with him. She didn't want to have enmity. She just wanted to love and to be part of God's plan. The new covenant made in his blood. And that covenant must be described in the context of all that is accomplished within the 70 Shavuot. As we go back to see what the angel Gabriel had said right at the beginning, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision of prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Well, we can easily see that everlasting righteousness isn't part of our experience right now. But we can see that what happened when the Messiah was cut off is at least we know that reconciliation for iniquity was made then. We know that that is when he and his blood anointed the most holy. We can see that when his blood anointed the most holy, that is when the new covenant was bought and paid for in his blood. And that is when the most holy was anointed, and yet we see that he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. For 1 week. We have seen that from the going forth of the commandment until the Messiah the Prince is cut off is 483 years, or 69 Shavuot. Then we see that there is 1 Shavuot left, according to what the angel said. 1 Shavuot left, right? 1 7-year period that's left. When does that 7-year period begin and end? We see that the he, the relative pronoun he, relates back to the closest associated noun, which is the Messiah who's cut off but not for himself. But yet we have heard, as of the 70s, a famous American author of Bible prophecy, of which his book has been now reworked at least 20 different times to try to get it up with what didn't happen. And it was he who said that the he would be the prince that shall come. But it says the people of the prince that shall come. Of the prince that shall come, again, is in a prepositional phrase and is not in the direct line of the antecedent to the preposition or the relative pronoun he. Sorry to have to do that to you after high school, but sometimes it's necessary to go back to the English language and see to whom the relative pronoun actually fits. And it does not relate back to the preposition or the he within the preposition there. So, now, we see that the most holy was anointed at Passover. And the Yom Kippur is the most holy day of the year, the Day of Atonement. That is the only day on which the high priest could enter in before the Ark of the Covenant and sprinkle blood on the east end of the Ark of the Covenant. Only one day, and that had to be done when the entire nation fasted after the 10 days of awe in preparation to come up to this day with their sins being confessed. And when he went in and sprinkled that blood on the east end, all those years, no one knew why 7 times on the east end. The rabbis cannot tell you why it's always on the east end. But what do we know? That each one of the feasts of the Lord is a shadow picture of that which the Messiah must fulfill. And we see that when his side was pierced, that blood went down and anointed the west end of the Ark of the Covenant, the end on which no animal blood was ever allowed, which is the right hand of the throne of God. We have to ask the question, if the Day of Atonement is the only day that the high priest could enter in before the Ark of the Covenant and sprinkle blood on the Ark of the Covenant, why did the Messiah's blood fall on the Ark of the Covenant at the time of Passover? You have to ask the question because they are all prophetic shadow pictures. You can't ignore it. God could have put the Day of Atonement on Aviv 14. He could have put it at the time of Passover and sprinkled the Passover lamb's blood on it. He could have done that, but he didn't. Why? Passover is the picture of personal redemption. You and I were bought and paid for on that day. And those who personally apply that blood over the doorpost of their heart and on the lintels, they are the ones at that point who are atoned for. It's the atonement for personal sins, taking care of you personally. However, the Day of Atonement is the day of the national redemption of Israel. It is national atonement and national redemption, and it's set in the 7th month because the fulfillment will not come, and he, the Messiah, will not confirm the covenant that was made in his blood with his people until Tishri 10 of 6001, when the 7th millennium begins, and the 10th day into the 7th or the Sabbath month. Now you're going to see how these pictures continue to be defined here. Because we have to ask, when does the week begin and end? Because we have a marker for the last Shavuot, or the last week, don't we? Do we have any time parameters that discuss from when he is cut off until the covenant is confirmed? No. We don't have any time parameters there. We only have the going forth of the commandment till the Messiah is cut off. Then we have the Messiah confirming his covenant, which begins the last Shavuot. So we can then ask, when does the week begin and end? The week begins Tishri 10, 6001, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. That is the day of the national redemption of Israel. And that is when God will do such an incredible miracle. Remember what happened, that God said to Moses, I am going to do something that from that day on, that Israel will never doubt you. They will believe that I have sent you. This is the day that's set aside for God to do an incredible miracle in the revealing of the Ark of the Covenant and bringing forth the testimony that God put in the earth of his Son, the Spirit, the water, and the blood that testify in the earth. That testimony that God gave of the Son, which is still into the earth today, north of the city wall of Jerusalem. It is on the Day of Atonement that God will do a mighty miracle and show his hand and his power. And from that day on, when that covenant is confirmed, that is when Israel will no longer doubt that Yahshua, Jesus, is Messiah. That will be the day that takes place.